Hi, I'm Frances Proctor, otherwise known as Angel Eyes Online. Welcome to this Xara Plus Filter Forge video tutorial. Today I have the first two-part tutorial on Xara's extrusions and how to texture them using Filter Forge. The project in these videos will be this lovely fall pumpkin. In this first part, I'll take you through using the 3D extrude tool in Xara to extrude a simple shape, and how to tweak the bevel settings and the lights to adjust colors and a whole lot more. Then I'll take you into Filter Forge and teach you how to create a simple filter from scratch that will allow you to map a realistic pumpkin texture to your extrusion. Are you ready? Let's get started. Okay, to begin, we're going to draw a simple blobby shape. I'm going to use the Shape Builder tool for this. If you're using a version that doesn't have the Shape Builder tool, you can use the freehand tool or some of the other drawing tools to create something similar. But I'm going to start by just drawing kind of a blobby shape. Maybe we'll make it a little bit smoother. Bring this down here a bit. We don't want this to be perfect, because pumpkins aren't perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Shift key to invoke the eraser tool, and I'm going to get a smaller brush, and we're just going to erase out a few areas here and there. These erasers that I'm making here and there are going to be where the pumpkin has the lines or the seams in it. I know this looks really weird and not at all like a pumpkin, but we're going to get there. Now I'm just, for the time being, I'm going to just give this a pale orange color. We're going to do most of the colorizing and texturizing in Filter Forge, but we'll start with this pale orange color. And now I'm going to go to my 3D tool, and we'll start with just a default, clicking the 3D button to give it a default extrusion, and I'm going to turn it up. And I'm going to pull it up like so. And I'm going to turn the glossiness off because we don't want the glossiness. Now we're going to take this strange blocky looking thing and we're going to make it look like a pumpkin. First thing I'm going to do is change the bevel type to curved. And you can see how this is affecting the sides of the extrusion rather than the face. Now I'm going to pull this all the way up, and you can sort of see how it's beginning to take shape. But it still doesn't look like a pumpkin. It looks more like a rather weirdly colored, strangely shaped marshmallow. Well, what we're going to do to give it more roundness is we're going to further increase the bevel size. And to do that, I'm just going to highlight in this box and type in 999 and hit enter. Now we'll pull this up, and now we're starting to look much more like a pumpkin. Now I'm going to experiment a bit with the lights. This one here brings a bit more brightness in places, but as you can see, I'm going to pull this back actually a little bit. We're getting this line across here, which I'm not liking. Alright, now this area in here is a bit too bright for what our needs. So I'm going to bring up the color editor and click here for the drop down list, and we're going to edit the light to color. I'm basically going to just darken the color. And to do that without changing the shade, I'm going to hold down the Control key and just pull down to just darken this down a bit. And this gives us some more shading in here. I quite like that. And this one I'm going to pull down just to give more shading up on the top. Okay, this is basically what we're going to start with when we go in a Filter Forge. We'll close this down now. And we can turn off the lights. Just move this more into the center of our page. And we'll go to our plugins, new, and we'll start up Filter Forge. And this is a little bit laggy because I'm recording while doing this. But once we get into Filter Forge, it shouldn't be too bad at all. Alright. Now here you can see a nicely textured pumpkin here. This is the filter that we're going to be creating. This is one that I created before. But I'm going to take it into the filter editor and I'm going to show you how I created this filter. So we'll click the filter editor and we're going to click create a new filter. And now, the first thing you'll notice when coming into the filter editor is you have one component already added to every filter, and that's the result component. It's here by default. And right now it's set to just a simple filter, and all it gives me is an input for source. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to change this to a surface filter. Now I've got more places for more inputs. We've got the surface color, the height, and there's even inputs here and sliders over here for reflectivity, reflection blur, and you can even make it metallic. Oh, I don't think we're going to be making any metal pumpkins. Alright, so I'm going to pull my workspace over here to give us room to work, and we're going to get started on creating our filter. We're going to start by first creating the texture, and then we're going to create the parts of the filter that will map it to the extrusion. So we'll start by bringing in some noise. We've got a whole bunch of different kinds of noise here. I'm going to be using Perlin noise today. This is one of the fastest noises for creating filters. Now, we're actually going to bring in 3 of these. Now these 2 up here I'm going to use to combine one part of the texture. And oh, I grabbed pyramids by mistake. We'll clear that. And this one down here will be the second part of the texture. Actually, we'll start with this first, because this is going to be where we're going to get our main colors from and the main part of our texture. So I'm going to go over here to the controls. And I'm going to bring in 2, no, I don't want sliders, I want 2 color controls. And we're going to hook these color controls into here. One into the noise and one into the background. Now this is going to allow us to input colors into our filter. And we can add any kinds of colors we like. So you could turn this pumpkin filter into a squash maker, or perhaps create other strange and wonderful textures with it. So let's start by, I'm going to leave the color control for the noise right now for the basic orange color. But the background we're going to change to a darker color. I'm going to give it kind of a brownish looking color. And click OK. Maybe we will edit that noise just a bit. We're going to maybe make it a bit more yellowy. And we can kind of tone that brightness down just a bit. Maybe we're a little too yellowy. Maybe we'll go. Alright. This looks good. So let's click OK. Okay, that's one part. Now up here we're going to create another layer that we're going to add to the texture. We're going to give the pumpkin skin some imperfections, because we don't want perfect plasticky looking pumpkins. We want these to be fairly realistic. So I'm going to start with this one, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to change the profile from linear to electricity. And I'm going to do the same thing on this one, again with the electricity. Alright, now this top one, I'm going to change the color, but I'm not going to put controls on that one. This is something that I guess could be done if you like. So I'm just going to change this noise, and I'm going to give this noise, we're going to give it kind of an olivey green color. Make it a bit brighter. And I'm going to click OK on that. And this background, I am going to bring it straight up so it's got more of a, about a mid-range color there. Alright, now these are going to be our imperfections, but we're going to need to add some transparency to this. And the transparency is going to do two things. It's going to break this up and make it more kind of generic looking, more random looking. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to adjust the roughness on this. Alright. So, now to set the transparency, I'm going to go to the channels, and I'm going to set an alpha channel. Bring this in, and we're going to plug this in here as the source, and we're going to use this second Perlin noise as our new alpha. It's going to set the alpha of this. So now I'm going to click this. First I'm going to double click this, and this is going to lock my preview here to this. Now I can click this one and adjust this one and see what's happening with this. So I'm going to bring this over a bit. And the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to make this a lot rougher so it breaks this up more. And I'm going to experiment with the contrast, giving it more contrast, sharpens the transparency. Less contrast brings in maybe some gray toned areas here. So let's bring this up a bit more about there. We can bring the roughness up more, which breaks this up more. And I think the other thing I'm going to do is maybe bump up the scale a bit on this. And we can experiment with dropping the details level, which will kind of soften it a bit. We don't want to drop it too much though. Alright, I'm going to leave that for now. We may come back and adjust that later once we get our further in our filter. So now I've got this layer and this layer. I'm going to blend these two layers together. Now we're going to go to the processing and we're going to pull over a blend component. Now this is going to be the foreground because we're going to have this is going to be on top, and this is going to be the bottom layer. Bring that in. Now I'm going to double click this so we can see how this is blending. And right now it's set at a normal blend mode, which is basically like a mix blend in Xara. Just simply mixing the two together. And I'm going to show you down here, we've got all kinds of different blend modes here to play with. Some of these, like multiply, is the same as Xara's stained glass. And some of these you'll recognize, like hue, luminosity. You know, there's darken, and some of these do different things. I'm going to have a look at using, I do believe it was the vivid light. No, trying to remember what I used now. Was it difference? Could have been a difference. Drop the opacity down a bit. Yeah, that's what we're going to use. That's what it was. I want to drop the opacity down a bit, but we don't want to drop it down too much. Alright, so this is kind of looking like a pumpkin texture. But I can tell by looking at this right now, if we plug this into the filter height, it's going to be a really rough looking filter. So we're going to need to smooth this down a bit. So I'm going to bring in a blur component. And I'm going to plug this into the blur. We'll double click on this. And now you can see it is really blurred it down. And we've lost all the details. So we're going to take this way down. I think I'm actually going to highlight this. And I'm going to type an amount in here of, I'm going to try 0.5 to start. Alright. So now just to have a look-see at our... So we'll plug this up in here, and this up in here, and I'll double click on this and we'll preview the height. Alright, now that is still looking a little rough, so we will go back to the blur, and I'll try it at 1. Alright, that's not too bad, but I think I'm going to try something a little bit different here. So I'm going to pull this out of here. If I pull this all the way over from here, you can see how rough this is going to be when our result loads. Oh, I didn't pull it to the height. Yeah, you can see how rough this is going to be, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to unplug this, and what I'm going to do, we'll put the blur back in, and I'm actually going to add a, believe it or not, a sharpen to the blur. What this may do is smooth out the edges that we... So let's... We're going to up the radius on that. I'm going to play around with this just a bit here. And now let's plug it in here to preview it. And you can see we're getting there, but it's still not doing what we need it to do. So I'm going to go back here to our blend. And I'm going to take and plug this into the blur and sharpen. And I'm going to take and I'm going to set the blur at 0.5. Now you can see how this is affecting the this part of it. So now let's put this into our blend. And now let's have a look at this. All right, we're definitely getting something a lot better. It's a lot more pumpkin-like. I'm going to leave it at this. We may come back and edit this just a little bit more at the end, but I'm going to leave it at this for now. And I'm going to go in to the mapping it to the extrusion part. Now to do that, first off, I'm going to bring in a couple of external image components. We're going to need at least 2 of these. And I'm going to bring it down here. Now I'm going to unplug this again for now, and we'll move it out of the way while we work on this. Alright, so we've got our surface here, and we're going to map this surface to the extrusion in 2 places, one for the color and one for the height. So to map this, we're going to need a couple more components. One component that we're going to need is a tone curve. So I'm going to get that up. Okay, from the adjustments, we're going to need a tone curve up here, a gamma for down here, and we're going to need 2 more components. This component is actually called a smudge, and again, one for each section of the filter. So we're going to start here and here. I'm going to start by plugging this into here as a source image, and we're going to bring in a Bezier curve. Those of you who are used to working with Xara will be used to using a Bezier curve. And now that I've plugged this in here, you can see that this curve is allowing us to set the tones in the image. And I've got the little curve control here, which brings up the box for our Bezier curve. And I'm going to pull this up because we want to make this very bright, very white. I'm just going to pull this up, Maybe I'll round that a bit more. I'm really going to go to the max on here until we've got a complete white. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to use this texture, and I am going to set an alpha channel using this. So we will go to our channels, and this will be the source, and this will be our new alpha. And if I click this, you can see our texture now has taken on the shape of our image. But it's still flat. And that's where the smudge comes in. Now I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to reuse this image here and just plug this into the tail section, and we're going to plug this into the source section here, and I'll zoom in so you can see how I've done this. And we're going to double click on this, and I'm going to just, now you can see, ooh, that looks awful. Yes, it does. But we are going to fix that. And you can see we've got some extra shading in there that we don't want. So we've got to get rid of that too. So I'm going to go down here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the density to 100. And right away, this makes a big difference. Although we still have our problems here and at the top. So what I'm going to do is actually switch this. I'm going to unplug this, and I'm going to go down here to this setup, and down here I'm going to put this into the gamma. I'm going to double click this, and I'm going to pull this down, and I'm going to really darken this right down. Maybe that's too dark, but we're going to darken that down. Now this is going to go into the smudge. This is going to go in the smudge for the source. And again, you're seeing the same thing that we had before. So I will start by dropping the density down. And well, actually, let's bring this down as our source. I'm going to cut a couple of steps here. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. Okay, so we have our color source and we have our height source. And I'm going to use these, and I'm going to edit this, and I am going to take this gamma right down. And I'm going to use this to set our tail for the smudge. Now, if we look at one of these, you can see this has not only fixed the problems we were having, but this is actually now mapping to the extrusion. It's actually bending it in places. which is what we wanted. So now we need to, I'm going to bring the result in closer because we're just about ready. And I can actually plug the height in there. The height end of things is done. And up here we need to bring our extrusion into it again. And we're going to blend this with the extrusion. But before we can do that, the extrusion has to match this. So I'm going to go to the processing, and I'm going to drag in the blend component, and I'm going to go down here and drag in another smudge. So I'm going to pull this over here and bring this, well, do it this way. So this is going to go into the smudge. And again, we're going to use this for the tail. And we're going to set the density at 100%. Alright, now this matches this. We'll pull this over, bring the blend down here. Alright, I'm going to zoom in now, and I'm going to put this in the foreground and this into the background. And I'm going to double click on this, and we're going to look and see how this is blending. This is looking really nice. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this, and I am going to go back to the linear light that we used before, and I'm going to tone this down quite a bit. We could even possibly have a look at maybe doing a overlay instead. Let's see what that looks like. Bring up the opacity on that. Yeah, actually I like that. So let's bring the opacity on this. And I'm going to pull this down here into surface color. And let's have a look at our results. Now we can see the texture and the color is blended here, but I think our texture is a little bit too much, and we'll be able to maybe adjust that in the filter controls. So I'm going to click down here where it says filter controls, and I'm going to go to the lighting tab, and I'll just bring this up a bit. And I'm actually going to bring the surface height down. And by doing that, about 3 maybe looks good. Maybe 4. Yeah, I think I like 4. Now you can see we've got our pumpkin, and it even looks like it's dimpled down on the top. We can go back to our image down here, and maybe we'll just edit the gamma just a bit. That's looking pretty good. One thing we can do here is, again, I'm just going to pull this into here before I connect it. a tone control on here. And we'll adjust the and we'll hit OK. Bring the gamma up. And let that re-render, and let's have a look. Alright, we can see it's added a little bit of problems there, so I think I'm just going to undo that. And I think we'll leave it at that. Our pumpkin creating filter is almost complete. I'm just going to zoom out a bit. And as I said before, these filters are so easily reused and readjusted. We can add in a few controls to make this filter more usable. We can add in a slider here. Maybe we'll put the roughness here and the roughness here and the roughness here. Now this roughness slider should control the roughness of our surface. But it's not. So let's take it off of that one. Alright, this is taking a little bit long to render because of my recording. But yes, this is working now. With just those two, I think, works better. We could bring that up more. Now this gives us some interesting adjustments on the filter. Pull that down. You could have a really smooth pumpkin. Alright, I'm going to leave it, maybe I'm going to set it around the 72 mark. We'll see where that leaves us. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to do one more little tweak down over here at the results. Now the result component does a lot of things. It's actually a special component. As well as mapping our color and height, and giving us the ability to choose filter types, this can also do a few more things. We could give our pumpkin a little bit of reflectivity, because a pumpkin is a bit shiny. So let's pull this up just a bit. We don't want to go overboard on that. So I'll pull that up, and we'll give it a bit of a blur to the reflectivity so that it's not such a sharp but a soft, more of a soft reflectivity. And this also, again, it brings up the surface too. So let's pull that down and have a look. Well, that's a pretty realistic looking pumpkin. We've got surface imperfections, we've got a variety of different colors in there, and it's all mapped to the extrusion. So now we're going to save the filter. I'm going to click down here, Save Filter, and we have a chance to give it a filter name. So let's call this Pumpkin Texture, and save. And this will render faster for you than it is for me right now, as I am recording. So the recording does slow things down. Alright, so there's our pumpkin texture. So at this point, you can click Apply and go back to Xara, and I'll meet you there for part 2 of our exploration of extrusions and textures. Thanks for watching.